The Jack and Mark Show presents Tall Tales from the Masterpiece Library. This episode, the first ever detective of ancient Egypt.
Hey, who started detective?
The private detective started way back. Flatfoot Laurentian.
He was an Egyptian.
Yeah, and he was working for the Pharaoh.
Hey, didn't old Flatfoot have a sidekick?
Oh yeah, he created the archetype of the sidekick. And his sidekick was
Hammerstead the dwarf?
Hammerstead the dwarf, yeah. He could always be counted on in a battle.
Now, didn't Flatfoot have an arch nemesis?
Oh yeah, there's always the arch nemesis.
Zambali the flightless.
Yeah, he couldn't fly, and no one understood why he called himself flightless. I think he had a sort of obtuse sense of humor. Probably made him the villain that he was. No one liked his jokes. That was one thing. He would go into a bar and try and tell jokes and say, "Hey, I'm flightless." And no one would get it because it's not funny. Then he'd say something stupid like, "Hey, I drank so much last night that I got diarrhea." This would be his idea of a joke, and people really didn't like him at all.
Didn't he start the knock-knock joke?
His famous one that really pissed off people was "Knock, knock, it's me." That was it. He didn't get jokes at all. And he would go to people's houses, knocking on their doors, and they'd say hello, and he'd say, "It's me."
Well, first he would knock, and then they'd open the door, and then he'd say, "Knock, knock."
Knock, knock after the door opens. Doesn't make sense.
He was trying to get him to say who's there, but he failed completely.
Yeah, he didn't get that part at all.
Wasn't he the guy who invented limericks?
It was once there was a
Pharaoh.
Oh yeah, the Pharaoh one. That got him into a lot of trouble. There once was a Pharaoh who thought he was great, but whenever he ate, he would hit his head with a plate. And only in the English translation does it rhyme. It doesn't rhyme in the Egyptian language.
That's what got people pissed off, because they were used to poems that rhyme.
And of course, the Pharaoh gets pissed off because you can't say anything against the Pharaoh.
Oh no, because word gets back to him.
And so the Pharaoh sent old Flatfoot to find who is in my kingdom making these terrible jokes. And there wasn't much of a comedy industry in those days.
Comedy was just getting started. Back in those days, the concept of getting it was fairly new. Knock, knock, it's me. There's no joke to get.
Yeah, there's always pieces missing.
Right.
They hadn't all the pieces together yet. They were trying though. But I guess we got to give him credit. He was on the vanguard of jokes.
Well, he's the guy who started the so many people walked into a bar.
Oh yeah, a horse, a donkey, and a banker walked into a bazaar. And then he said, "What did they buy?" No matter what the person said,
he'd say right.
And he thought that was funny. So if the person answers, like, say,
some carpeting.
They bought carpeting. And he'd go, "Right." And then they said, "Okay, so what happens next?" He said, "No, that's it." Oh, they got so pissed off. And then he became the nemesis of Flatfoot. And Flightless thought he was a misunderstood comedian. And like many stand-ups who don't make it, they blame everyone else and never really realize that they're just not funny.
Well, old Flightless had a sidekick as well, didn't he? A criminal sidekick.
Yeah, he took on the name of his first joke.
His name was Who's There?
Oh yeah, good old Who's There. Now he was a lot more likable because people would say, "Who are you?" And he'd go, "Who's there?" And they said, "No. Not who, no, who are you?" And he said, "Well, who's there?" And they said, "I'm there asking you who you are." And he'd go, "No, who's there?" At least Who's There was making a foray into comedy.
But he had a special power, Who's There.
Yeah, he was really skinny, and he could hide behind things. He was good at hiding behind trees, kind of go up in a tree and just pretend he was one of the limbs. He could imitate a branch as well as one of those insects.
He was like that, yeah, because he could walk on water, actually. I mean, he was mistaken for the Christ at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah, but not the Jewish one.
No, not the well-known one.
No, not the well-known. This is a lesser-known Christ. He did create some miracles, but actually was just an illusionist.
Well, they weren't called apostles, and he didn't have 12 of them. He had 3 of them, and they were 3 good buddies, I think they called them.
Yeah, it was Christ and the 3 good buddies.
Yeah, what were the buddies' names?
Oh, I think it was Gesundheit and Chest of Drawers and
Bobbernickel. Gesundheit, Chest of Drawers, and Bobbernickel. He wasn't crucified.
He never got crucified in the usual way.
Isn't there a resurrection story around the lesser-known Christ?
Who's there? The lesser-known Christ comes floating down the river, tied to this cross.
We have concluded our broadcast schedule for today. Good night.